Hi, everybody, and welcome back to 10-Minute Bible. My name is Michael Venema, and I try to look at chunks of the Bible in a way that's understandable for all who are listening, whether you're well acquainted with the Bible or not. And I think it's just the most brilliant and true and amazing story that you can discover. And in the Bible, we discover so much about ourselves, about the world that we live in, about other people, about God, and it gives us these incredible bearings for our lives and an incredible hope for the future. So I want to touch on some of that by looking at Luke's version of Jesus' life. And if you've been tuning into this series, then you know that we are working through the Gospel of Luke, the good news according to Luke. The word gospel means good news. And so I'm at chapter 7. There are about 20-something chapters in Luke's version of Jesus' life, and we are at chapter 7. So let's dive into that. At the end of our last video, which would have brought us to the end of chapter 6, we completed a look at a section of Luke, at a section of the story of Jesus, in which Jesus lays out for his listeners, for his followers, the ways in which God requires us to live. And one way of looking at the instructions that Jesus gives for living is that they make so much sense. They appear to be, grounded in just the ordinary things that we see all around us and the way we see people behave. And when you see them, you look at it and say, "Well, that makes total sense. People should be truthful. People should be caring and treating each other with respect and all these other things." So that's one way of looking at Jesus' instructions for living. And even if you don't yet see them as God's instructions, that's one way to kind of get into them and then find a pathway to God, who's behind all these incredible ways of living, which many of us take for granted because they are part of the thinking of vast stretches of the world's populations these days. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places. So they seem kind of normal and ordinary to many of us. But for others who have never been exposed to these things, we have to remember that these things don't necessarily hold true. That is, to be caring toward others, to be respectful, to be truthful, to watch how we talk, to watch our mindset, to not be judgmental, and all these kinds of things. Anyway, we're in a change of pace when we get to chapter 7, because here Jesus is back on the move and he is traveling. And you discover that when you see the stories of Jesus as traveling, that people are gathering around him. They're very interested in what he has to say. He is revealing to them some new ways of thinking, but not totally new. They're rooted in the Jewish faith. Jesus is Jewish, and most of his listeners are from the Jewish community in Israel about 2,000 years ago. So anyway, here is Jesus at the beginning of chapter 7, and he's talking with some people, and what happens in this particular situation is that some messengers come, and these are messengers from a Roman person in authority, a Roman centurion. He's a commander of a unit of 100 of the Roman army, and generally the Romans are hated by the Jewish people. But this gentleman is respected by the Jewish people. Let's kind of see here when this centurion heard that Jesus was back, he sent leaders from the Jewish community asking Jesus to come and heal his servant, because Jesus had by now a reputation not only as a terrific teacher, but also as a healer. And the Jewish people say to Jesus, you should go out and help this person. This Roman centurion deserves it because he loves our Jewish people. and he even built our meeting place, probably meaning that he provided the funding for the building of a Jewish meeting place, a synagogue in the local village. And so this is interesting, because most Roman centurions would not be at all liked by the Jewish people, but this Roman centurion has the respect of the Jewish people, because he has built them a meeting place. So this means that this centurion, even though he's not Jewish, this Roman centurion has respect for the Jewish faith and the Jewish people. So Jesus goes with the messengers, and while I'm just reading here, while he was still quite far from the house, the centurion sent friends to tell him, Master, you don't have to go to all this trouble. I'm not a particularly good person, and I'd even feel a bit embarrassed to have someone as righteous as you, so to speak, enter my home. Well, that's quite a remarkable attitude, isn't it? That this person has a sense that there might be some people who are so righteous, so good, that you don't really deserve to have them enter your house. That's maybe worth thinking about. Anyway, I want to move on, though, because the message that the centurion says is, he says, I'm a person who is under authority, and I also have authority. So I receive orders and fulfill those orders, and I also give orders, and the servants and the soldiers under me fulfill my orders. So Jesus, I know that you are also a person who understands authority, and I know that if you say the word, my servant will be healed, because you've got authority over illnesses and physical difficulties. Again, because Jesus had a reputation as a healer. So this is kind of a cool thing to Jesus. Jesus in the story, it says, in one translation it says he's taken aback, and in other translations, which try to be a little bit more accurate but are sometimes a bit wooden, it says Jesus was amazed at what he was hearing, and he says, I've never encountered this kind of faith even among my own Jewish people. Now, I've been thinking about that a little bit, because Jesus has encountered quite a few Jewish people by this time, and surely he has met people who are filled with faith. And so I'm not exactly sure how to read this. Maybe it's literally true that he hasn't read or hasn't encountered this kind of faith before, but I have a feeling that there's two things going on here. On the one hand, Jesus is maybe using a bit of exaggeration, but just to drive home a very important point to his Jewish listeners. Most of his listeners are Jewish. And he's saying to them, even among the non-Jewish people, God is able to raise genuine faith. So this is very remarkable. The other thing is that, looking at it from the level of Luke's intention, I've sometimes mentioned that Luke is writing for a non-Jewish audience. And if you read the opening verses of Luke, you discover he's writing for one non-Jewish person, a guy named Theophilus. And Theophilus is not a Jewish name, and it's a Greek name, and it actually means lover of God. But that's another interesting thing. But it's kind of cool to know that. But the thing is that Luke wants to emphasize God's working among the non-Jewish people. So it's not a wonder that Luke highlights this particular story, and also how Jesus responds to the messengers from this Roman centurion. Anyway, so Jesus says that the person should be healed, and when the messengers got back home, they discovered that indeed the servant had been healed. Okay, so that's a very neat story. We're going to go on to the next little bit in Jesus' travels, and this is a very amazing story. Jesus comes upon, he's entering the village, a village called Nain. This village, by the way, is in northern Israel, in Galilee, which is where a lot of Jesus' activities took place. He would travel sometimes back and forth between northern Israel, Galilee, and the southern parts, Judea. Anyway, so he's coming into the village of Nain, and he's encountering a funeral procession. So what's happened is that the son of a widow, so the father, the husband has passed away, and the son has died, and there's a funeral procession, which would have meant a lot of public wailing and grieving, because this is how people express themselves. And you still see this at least in the Western world. You were struck by this, when we see news clips from the Middle East where there is a lot of, wailing and public grieving out in the streets. So this was happening also in the Middle East in Jesus' time. And so it says that the mother was a widow. And when Jesus saw the widow, in one version I've got here, it says his heart broke. And he said to her, don't cry. Now, why is this woman's heart broken? Well, clearly, she loved her son. Very natural, and that's how it should be. It would be unnatural for her not to feel grief because her son had died. But also, the fact that she's a widow, this leaves her in a very, very vulnerable situation. In those days, women, wives, were very dependent on their husbands for economic well-being, although there are women in the Bible who do just fine, as even businesswomen. Maybe we'll get to some of those stories later on in our series. But this particular woman is stricken not only because her child has died, but I think it leaves her very vulnerable to poverty. So Jesus goes over and he touches the coffin, and he says to the body, he says, "Young man, I tell you, get up." And he does, and he begins talking, and Jesus presents the raised young man to his mother. Well, what an awesome moment. Now, if you know a little bit about the Bible, you know that every once in a while there is a story of people being raised from the dead, and this happened in the pre-Jesus parts of the Bible, the stories leading up to Jesus. They happen in the stories of Jesus himself. There's this one. There's also there's two other people who Jesus raises that we know of, and in the post-Jesus parts of the Bible, there are also people who are raised from the dead, and also at Jesus' death. So there's, I think there's 9 individuals, and then at Jesus' own death, when he died, it was kind of a cataclysmic moment for the world, but also at that time, some graves are opened in the city of Jerusalem. Maybe we'll get to that story at some point. So this is not a terribly shocking or new thing for the Jewish people, because they have stories in their faith and in their history of people being raised from the dead by God's power. But still, whenever they happen, these are astounding and stunning events. Now, I was going to go on a bit longer today, but I see that we're getting on to about 13 or 14 minutes, so I want to end it there. But in the next couple of sections, we're going to meet, again, Jesus continues to travel. Some disciples of John the Baptist, some of his apprentices, come to Jesus with a question. And then also there's some other high conflict things that happen very quickly. So we'll get to those as we work our way through chapter 7. So thanks a lot for listening, and I hope the rest of your week goes well. God bless you. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.